Scott Frost has hired Sean Clark, and Mike Dawson is coming home to Orlando.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. With the first word from the last word on sports is my good friend, Andrew Glucov. Andrew, Scott Frost continues to fill out his staff, and, we're going to start with one that he tapped a former head coach to come in here. Scott Frost has hired Sean Clark as offensive line coach. Now, before we started recording, you thought that this was an interesting hire, and I want to get your thoughts on why this is such an interesting hire.
Well, for a few reasons. One, you got a guy who has experience as a head coach now working for you. So, I mean, you have experience there. This is a great hire. Perfect for you. You're coming to you're coming back to a school, but it's a new environment. You know, the names and faces have all changed. You know, your ADs have changed. Everything's changed. So bringing a guy with that much experience, is a short-term solution in this game. You obviously you want to play the long game, but Sean Clark's going to land somewhere else pretty soon. I mean, it goes without saying. But you look at his history. This is an offensive lineman who's coaching offensive linemen and has lots of experience coaching offensive linemen. So this is a guy who knows what he's doing and has had success doing it. I think it was a mistake for Appalachian State to fire him. It was his first bad season. They went 5-6. I mean, the year before they won 9 games in a bowl game. So, I mean, the Mountaineers' loss is, the Knights' gain. And I find it, there's some parallels here, and I think Scott Frost probably recognized it. Sean Clark is an alum of Appalachian State.
That's rough. Getting fired by your alma mater is rough, man.
And that's what happened to Scott Frost.
Yeah.
Granted, Frost's run was really bad, and Clark's run was not. Sure, he didn't set the world on fire with any conference championships, but he had the 2 conference championship game appearances. They 3-1 in the bowl games. I mean, they were not bad. You had to deal with having a growingly a competitive Sun Belt conference. People don't realize this. Obviously, the Sun Belt used to be the joke conference of the FBS, but now it's become very competitive, and Conference USA has become kind of the joke conference. So it's tough to be in that situation where Appalachian State was the big man on campus for a while in that conference, and they've taken a step back, with this past year. But to fire your coach over, I don't know, man. I think they made a mistake. But you know what? Scott Frost recognizes that. He recognized the situation, recognizes the talent, and so you're bringing a guy in who has lots of offensive line coaching experience at multiple schools, including Louisville. So there is power conference experience there as a position coach. So he knows what he's getting into. And the UCF offensive line was much maligned over the last few years. Could not find really any consistency. They had a few good guys, but they had to keep moving things around and never quite found it. It never was fully stabilized. It never found the full it factor. Imagine how RJ Harvey would have done if they had a much more consistently strong offensive line.
Well, I want to stick here for a second because you were pretty vocal during the season about how inconsistent. I'm saying it lightly. You have some other words, but UCF's offensive line was. Do you see Clark as a fix for that? Was that all coaching? Give me a percentage of coaching versus talent level there in terms of offensive line issues for UCF last year.
Well, it's a bit of both. They had talent, but the problem is you need at least five talented guys. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And, he's a fan favorite, was very well loved, but Paul Rubelt was a liability on the offensive line. He's super tall, about 6'10". That's tough as an offensive lineman because it's all about leverage, getting low and that point of attack. And it's hard for a guy that height to be able to have that ability to get down and be as explosive. It hurt in the run game. If you notice, the biggest success was usually either to the outside on the right side or more towards the middle or left side, maybe in between the guard and the center going to the right, but not so much off tackle. And I don't think that's coincidental. He struggled a little bit on the right side as right tackle, and I think it was more symptomatic of Gus's issues with recruiting offensive linemen for UCF. Yeah, sure, he got a few guys, Marshall, to name a few, but it never quite fully came together. And with the guys like Caden Kittler leaving over this offseason, Marshall also left, Adrian Medley left. So this is a chance to hit the reset button. You got a guy who has head coaching experience, has a name out there, and a lot of offensive line experience as far as being a position coach. It makes for a good sell of, this is a guy who knows how to develop offensive linemen. He knows how to work offensive linemen. And, UCF's going to have to hit the portal hard this offseason to kind of plug in those holes temporarily while they work on, bringing in freshmen to develop. I think they did a really good job of bringing Clark in. I don't think Clark's going to last very long at UCF, but that's not because he's not good, because I think he's going to get a better job somewhere else. Former head coaches still don't stay down for long, especially ones that have a 40-24 career record at their previous employer.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at run blocking grades for on Pro Football Focus for UCF's offensive line last year, they had one lineman, particularly in run blocking, that graded higher than 70. The rest were low 60s, high 50s. I mean, when it's that widespread, and I think it's systemic. I think it's coaching. Obviously I cover other schools. We talk about this same thing. When it can't be everybody, right? Everybody you recruited can't be the worst offensive lineman that's ever played football. But when you look at the pass blocking grades, it worked a little better there in pass blocking for these guys. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was clearly better when you look at their PFF grades.
Well, you gotta understand that run blocking and pass blocking require two different skill sets.
Exactly.
Run blocking is about strength and explosion, about lower leverage, and driving forward. You need a lot of leg strength. You need to get low, get underneath the shoulder pads, push the guy up, and drive him back. Pass blocking is agility based. You have to have that lateral side to side movement to maintain the pocket. And it's not as much about strength, because you just have to buy the quarterback a little bit of time to make a play happen. So, UCF's problem was largely in the strength department, less so than the agility department. Herb Hand, the coach, the former offensive line coach at UCF, has moved on. And when he was hired from Texas, there was questions about his ability to develop offensive linemen. It was one of the hires that I looked at and I'm like, I don't know, based on the resume and what we saw from his previous stop. So I think this is a good chance for a reset and to focus more on making a more well-rounded offensive lineman. Now, I know Scott Frost wants to pass the ball often and drive that ball down the field, but he has flat out said, hey, I'm going to work with what I got. And right now, even though RJ Harvey's gone, Miles Montgomery has proven that he is a capable running back, and he's going to have a lot of opportunities to run the ball. Cam Ingram also was a freshman last year, got a little bit of work. He's going to be, busy in the run game. So I would not be overly surprised to see this not as heavy this, as in 2024, but still a run first team that opens the pass.
Well, that's it for run blocking, but what about run stopping? UCF has made an interesting hire on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to get into that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about that you were paying for twice, Andrew?
Sure has.
I know you use Rocket Money. I use Rocket Money, and it's happened to us. We had a few subscriptions that we didn't even realize we were still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant, Andrew, for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. That's a lot of Christmas gifts, $740. Well, it is for me. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. UCF has made another hire. We're big on graphics at Locked On UCF. So if you watch the other UCF channels, and for our pod listeners, we say it out loud. We talked about Sean Clark, but Mike Dawson on the other side of the ball, defensive run game coordinator and edge coach. Look, I thought they did fairly well rushing the passer at times last year. But what do you think about Mike Dawson? Mike Dawson's coming home, by the way. This is a former UCF coach under Scott Frost in 2017.
Yeah, Dawson was the defensive line coach for both of Scott Frost's seasons in 16 and 17. So, what's old is new, and he comes back. He's actually got a completely different role now. Instead of just the whole defensive line, he's handling the edge rushers because Kenny Martin is staying with defensive tackles. And, last year when Ted Roof was still defensive coordinator, UCF couldn't buy a sack. But things got better once Addison Williams took over. So this was a talented group. Looks like Nigel Kelly is staying around. He was originally talking about going in the portal, pulled back. And looks like he's sticking around, and he's going to be the top edge guy this year. So, keep an eye on him as he works with Coach Dawson. Mike Dawson actually has quite a robust resume. He actually started his coaching career in the late 90s, in the FCS level, and then became a grad assistant at Pitt in 99, and then moved into the regular coaching circuit, going for position coaches, but his specialty has been on the defensive side of the ball. He's worked with the edge or out or defensive line multiple seasons. In fact, he was at Nebraska with Scott Frost from 20 to 22. He was also there in 2018. He took a year in between with the New York Giants. But obviously the New York Giants coaching staff's had some problems. So, he had his year there, ended up coming back to Nebraska, but he's worked largely with the edge guys. So, you actually look at his resume, it's not bad. People are like, oh, well, he can't carry a job. No, he gets changed. He's with, the same school. He's just been moved around to different positions. That doesn't mean he's bad. It means he's versatile and goes where he's needed. Last couple of years, he's worked as an analyst, but he's at least been still in the college football circuit. Now he's back, coaching. And, you look at defensive run game. That was actually one of Alex Grinch's worst areas is the run game. So, to have a guy specialize in that to help Grinch, at his role of defensive coordinator is pretty smart. We talked about grading hires, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later. I got to say, Frost has done a really good job with these position coaches.
I think he has done a good job with the position coaches so far. Now, you know from the last episode, big fan of reaching back into your coaching tree for guys that you've worked with that understand how you want things done and how you like to operate. Mike Dawson, UCF edge coach and defensive run game coordinator. When he got hired, he got quoted here. We've got a quote. I'm looking forward to contributing to the success of this program, working with an outstanding group of coaches and helping our players grow both on and off the field. Now, might sound like a canned statement, but
that's a canned statement.
Yeah. However, in reaching out to some people, this is something that he believes. He does believe in developing guys, and he believes in that off-field relationship. Now, I'm big on this, Andrew. I believe that coaches have a responsibility. When you go through the recruiting process and your parents are guiding you through and you're trying to choose a school, and everybody's tossing not only big promises of playing time, but money. And you're trying to figure out what's the best decision for you. These parents are turning their young men, their kids over to these coaches. I think they have a responsibility to be invested at least somewhat in their personal development as young men.
If you're not invested in the personal development, you shouldn't be a college coach, period. That's part of the job. You're taking, kids who are still very wet behind the ears at 17, 18 years old, and you're helping transform them into men. 21, 22, and maybe even 23 years old, and you're setting them out in the world, because most guys don't make it to the pros. So, you're cultivating, future citizens, and you're setting them out in the world. You want them to have a good work ethic, a head on their shoulders, help them focus on education and stuff like that. I think we get overly caught up with the NIL. Most players aren't going to bank big bucks, as in NIL. They may make a little bit here and there, but the truth is, these depth guys, they don't make buku bucks. That's the 1% of college football. Most of these guys may get a little bit here and there, but for the most part, they're angling for, sure, they want to play during their limited time, but they're angling for, life after football. Because a lot of them know there is no, football in the pros for them, or if it is like the UFL, you cannot make a living like playing in the UFL or the Arena League. You're not going to make a big living on that. You need to have some sort of career to fall back on. A lot of these kids, they get it, they understand it. And that's where these coaches have to focus on developing those relationships. So Scott Frost, very big on developing relationships. And I don't think he would hire guys that wouldn't agree with him on that premise. And the fact that Dawson, outside of 2019, has been with him since 2016, that shows that very strong degree of trust, because they've worked together for so long. He knows, Dawson buys into my philosophy, and otherwise he wouldn't be there.
Yeah. I think this is a great hire. And like I said, hearing him have that attitude coming through the door, that he's going to be invested in young men's personal development. It may sound like a canned statement, but there are coaches out there that do believe. I've talked to them. I'm here to coach football. It was your job to raise your son before he got to me. And that's not necessarily untrue, but I don't think it absolves coaches of the responsibility I think they have to take that young man and continue that development into college, making sure they stay on the straight and narrow. Can Scott Frost make UCF that sort of place, right? Well, it starts with hiring assistants who are buying into that mantra and will continue that practice there. So love this hire. Look, he's made a lot of hires. We're going to review all the hires that Scott Frost has made right after a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, Andrew, America's #1 sports book. If you watch the college football playoff this weekend, A lot of folks probably didn't cover because it was 4 duds, Andrew. These games were terrible. We watched 4 blowouts this weekend. But look, man, if you're going to lose it on FanDuel, with our friends on FanDuel, you'll get $200 in bonus bets that you could have bet on these games with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Playoff games were terrible, Andrew. They were awful.
Speak for yourself. I loved watching my Ohio State Buckeyes win.
Okay, there you go. All right. Fair enough. Lots of salty Alabama fans on the sidelines, and they were like, "Are you not entertained? Is this not what you wanted?"
I have a statement for Alabama fans. Don't have your team lose to 2 6-6 squads, and then you get in.
Preach, my brother. Look, back to UCF here. Scott Frost is filling out the staff, man. He's in the last week. He's made a lot of hires. He got Steve Cooper in as offensive coordinator. This is a hire we talked about earlier in the week. A hometown favorite, and UCF son Mackenzie Milton returns to Orlando. Probably my favorite hire here, if anything. I love seeing young guys who played for a coach come back to coach for the coach. It's going to be amazing. Alex Grinch, it's Christmas, but they're hiring Grinches in Orlando as defensive coordinator. Then you got Kenny Martin, who was retained as defensive tackles coach. Fan favorite there. Sean Beckton also retained as associate head coach and wide receivers coach. Add to that the 2 hires we talked about today, Mike Dawson, defensive run game, and Sean Clark at offensive line. Looks like they still have to fill linebacker and defensive backs.
Yeah, they still got a couple more spots to go, but they've done a really good job. I got to give Frost a lot of credit. These position coach hires have been fantastic, just absolutely fantastic.
Well,
Sean Beckton is a wide receiver. He knows that. Mackenzie Milton, quarterback coach, it was the natural progression. And look at it this way, with Ohio State defeating Tennessee, because Milton got to go back to Tennessee to help finish off the season there. Now he gets to go work 120% for UCF going forward. So he gets to come home. And then keeping Kenny Martin was fantastic. Great recruiter, did really well, developing Lee Hunter and Ricky Barber, and then John Walker before he got hurt. The real question marks come in your coordinator positions. And I think we talked about this before, when we talked about grading early on. I gave a C grade to the coordinators and with Cooper and Grinch. But I do want to highlight the hiring of Dawson as the run game coordinator. I think helped offset the hiring of Grinch a little bit, because run game was not his strongest suit. So maybe, okay, we recognize where he goes strong or where he goes weak, and have adapted a little bit. But that just makes those position coach hires even better. And getting Clark at offensive line, man, what a steal. What an absolute steal. And if he stays 1 year, that so be it. But to get a guy with head coaching experience that, just outside kicked out and immediately, find a new job, I think was quite a coup for Scott Frost. So I still have them at a B-, but they're creeping towards a B on my grade, because these position hires have been so good.
That was going to be my next question. Has your grade changed? Andrew is sticking with a B- so far. We'll see if these last 2 hires can help push them to a B or a B+. Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew, and you can catch my work on The Last Word on College Football, a part of the Last Word on Sports family.
Thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including UCF. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.